We've got our speakers still on the panel, so Jeremy, Richard and Ben. We've also got James Copeland, who spoke earlier from the NFU, and Sharon Lashley, Managing Director and CEO of Climate Action North. That sounds like a big job. So we've got a few questions that have come through into the chat. If you've got more questions, please enter them into the Q&A. If you like questions that are already there, please like them by pressing the heart, and that will give us an idea what's most of interest. So we'll go through. Let's have a look. So there's a first one which will allow, I guess, most people to say one thing that they would like. I think the question is members of the public to do, but I think if you wanted one thing for someone else to do, what would it be? Richard, we'll go to you because you were speaking last, but what would it be that you would want someone to do?
When you say someone, do you mean any member of the public, or do you mean, can I choose what kind of person?
You can. I think it was targeted as members of the public, but if there was one thing that you wanted someone to do that would achieve what you wanted to achieve, what would it be?
Well, I will answer it from the point of view of a member of the public. I would get them to think about what they're having for their tea tonight, and to think about where that food's coming from, and then to think about the wooden chair that they're sitting on, assuming it is a wooden chair, I hope it would be, and the wooden desk that they're sat at, or the table that they're sat at, and the newspaper that they might read as they nod off in front of the telly later, and to just ask themselves, where have those things come from? And how much better would the world and planet be if most of those things had come from within 200 miles of where they were sat?
Great, thank you. Sharon?
If it was me asking people to do stuff, it would be just to think about making one small change, because we have an initiative anyway that we run through Climate Action North, which just asks people to think about how easy it is just to do one thing. And if the 7.8 billion people on the planet all did one thing differently for the environment, for the planet, it would make a real difference. So it could be anything, similar to what Richard said about, thinking about where your stuff originates from, or looking at single-use plastics, for example, making the change, thinking about, rewilding a tiny area of your garden, just letting it go wild, that kind of thing. Anything like that has one small change. It's easy to do. It's about making it as simple as possible for people to make that transition without it being complicated.
Great, thanks, Sharon. I think that echoes with a lot of other things where things are complex and there's lots of options. Just do something, I think, is the answer. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. It's quite an interesting question, isn't it? There's a few things, I think. One, I think just to be an advocate and passionate about nature and wildlife, and just to talk about it. And I think the second thing, sort of picking up on what Richard said, is to think about where your food comes from. And actually, nature recovery needs farming animals. We need to support farmers, and we need to eat, livestock that are produced in a sustainable and good way. Even our rewilding projects, they will need cattle, they will need pigs, they will need sheep to, ensure that recovery happens. So think about where your meat comes from and buy some local meat.
Thank you, Chris. Ben?
Well, I guess, following neatly on from that, perhaps, just a quick bit of reflection every time we flush the bog, and just think about where that water's come from and where it's going, and everything that has to happen in between.
Thank you, Ben. Not around tea time, perhaps, but who knows? James, what was the one thing that you would want someone to do? Who would that be?
I think let's take it back down to the members of the public, and I think it's about exploring opportunities to reconnect with growing food yourself. or growing plants and getting to know nature and understanding nature. Because I think one of the critical challenges that we often see is lots of ambition and lots of ideas without fundamentally understanding the natural processes and that things take time. And sometimes things do work and sometimes things don't. And this kind of almost no regrets policy in certain circumstances, we can do our best. And I think anyone can do that, whether it's if you're lucky enough to have a green space in yourself, a garden, and so put some space down to nature, because it's what farmers are doing already and land managers are doing already. And then you realize the challenges of when you're asking people to do things. Well, actually, yeah, it is a bit of a challenge. If I take up what I've done in my garden, someone asks me to do something to do with my garden or my allotment, actually, yeah, I can understand where that person's coming from. So, yeah, go and plant some carrots or some tomatoes, but also don't forget to have some nature in there, because it helps with the pollinators.
Thanks, James. Going by my track record, I'm amazed there's any food in the shops. But yes, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think the wild bit in the garden is great. It's a real opportunity, and perhaps it's trying to break down those barriers around your garden as well, so that your garden is part of a bigger nature reserve. When I had those figures, only 3% of land in Middlesbrough is for wildlife, but if you look from an aerial picture, there's a lot of back garden there, but it's all rather segregated with walls and fences. So make sure you knock a few holes through so the hedgehogs can get through, and turn that into a sort of combined big shared nature reserve. And then also think about, a huge amount of gang mowing going on, great big areas of grassland getting mown all the time, and just appreciating a little bit of long grass would be lovely, and tell your council to stop mowing it for a bit, which will save a bit of carbon cost, might reduce your rates if you're not paying for the man driving the lawnmower, and create some really big areas of good habitat.
Thanks, Jeremy. I did send my councillor a picture of my overgrown dean and said thank you very much. But yeah, that's great. I think there's one here for yourself, Chris. It was about previous discussions about the disparities in urban deprived communities, and a question is the urban social recovery that we've talked about being factored into nature recovery network strategies and green infrastructure strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. It is not a rural programme, and that's why one of the pilots for the local nature recovery strategies was Greater Manchester, and that was very deliberate to look at how nature recovery can work in an urban context and plan it within the urban context in terms of green infrastructure. So, yeah, it is incredibly important that this is not viewed as a rural programme. This is a rural and urban programme, and it is about recovery within the cities and towns and villages and the rural space.
Great, thanks, Chris. There's a question here from Julia Harrison that came through, and it's regarding village parks or village green developments, and just asking, is that, I guess, is it a greenwash? Is it a way of getting building on the green belt, and claiming it's a nature-based building project? I don't know if we've got anyone who's specifically expert in that, but garden villages, I think, is the phrase. People got views on garden villages and whether they're a positive contribution to this space. Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm not a planner, and I can't really answer that question specifically. I do think we have to be very careful of greenwash. There are a lot of people trying to sell green ideas without substance behind them, and we're right to challenge those. Equally, we do need new houses, new places to live, and if we do those in a way that is nature friendly right from the start, that's a massive opportunity, I think. So I can't answer specifically for this particular location, but yeah, challenge the greenwash, but then also recognise that new generations need homes too.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think there's some interest, Richard, in the Cotham wood. There's some detail about what was in there, but do we get the impression that there's a aspiration of an expansion for that? Is there a Stockton to Darlington trailway? Do you see what I did there? In terms of a woodland connection.
I remember that many years ago we identified the Darlington to Stockton kind of A66 corridor as being an area of great potential for woodland creation in a way that would benefit both of those communities and would create a kind of linkage between them. And and obviously Cotham's in that area, and is it Long Newton, Long Newton as well, which was the privately owned and managed big woodland creation scheme in that area. I without poring over a map again and talking to the individual landowners, it's difficult to answer the question with certainty, because it's obviously it's their call. But from a strategic perspective, I think that will be a really important area. And I think what James was saying earlier about BPS going and lack of real clarity on what sustainable farming incentive is going to offer does create an environment of opportunity in the short term. And I think those areas that are perhaps seen as being marginal arable or improved grass carrying beef and sheep are the areas that are of generally least value for conservation, and that they're not highly productive, and they're not areas that are likely to attract much by way of sustainable farming incentive compared with protected landscapes, priority habitats, etc. So from a strategic perspective, we feel that those areas are areas where there's probably greatest opportunity for substantial woodland creation in a way that's not going to compromise delivery of food, not going to compromise delivery of nature. So yeah, strategic, long answer, but strategically, yes.
Graeme, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm on mute. Thanks, Richard. I think I'm off mute now. Sharon, yeah, there was a reference in the chat earlier about a Weir and Tees Action for Rivers initiative. Mm-hmm. Do you want to just give us a minute on that?
Yeah, it's pronounced water, so it's a northern thing. So it's a very northern thing. It's like a program we made up with Climate Action North, because my background is waste, and obviously a Marine Conservation Society Beachwatch organiser as well. I was worried about waste in the river and plastic pollution. So one of the key programmes we set up as part of Climate Action North was Weir and Tees Action for Rivers. So we're based on the Weir, and we're actually cleaning up the Weir using 4 areas, so on land, on water, on the rocks, the rock armour, and on the mudflats. So we have a boat, a water witch, going up and down the river, and we're also picking on land as well. So it's about addressing plastic pollution really in the rivers. So obviously interested in talking to Ben about the Tees eventually. We're working on the Weir in 2021, but also, we're not funded by charity funding or whatever. We are a community interest company funded solely by CSR money from businesses. So which means we can crack on with it straight away. We don't have to wait for any boards or anything else to sort of, approve what we do. We just have to get on with it. We recognise we're in a climate emergency and waste is a big problem. So it's a programme we're running actively on the Weir with support from corporates, and we're getting on with it. And we also have a loop, a circular economy loop. So we have a source for the plastic pollution that we pick, and we're actually putting it through a waste stream that will generate things like plastic coat hangers and plastic furniture. So we can actually close the gap in terms of everything we collect. We know where it's going. It's going to be made into something else. So that's what we're doing. So that's the Water Project in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sharon. I think there might be a few people interested in that. Might get back to you after the conference. James, a question for you. Just from, you're probably closest of anyone to speaking to land managers and landowners, sometimes different people. So do you detect a willingness, an increasing willingness of land managers and owners to get involved in essentially farming nature almost?
Absolutely. And I think it's something, as I've said this morning in that session, it's something that we've already done a lot of, and the industry is continuing to build upon. I think sometimes it's about using the right terminology so that they realise that you're building on top of what they've already done. It's about having the right thing in the right place. And I think one of the big challenges we have at the moment is if I'm a farmer at the moment, I've got about 20 or 30 cars parked on the drive of all different groups, organisations, company, businesses, government, with different individuals in those cars wanting to say what they would like that land manager and that business to do. And what we as an organisation are really keen to do is to see how we can get as many of those cars off the road and into a electric bus at the bottom of the drive. And as they are travelling up that farmer's drive to the land manager, they collectively come together, whether it's policy, regulation, ambition, and ask, and they agree that these are the top 2 or 3 things that we think this land manager might be interested in. Pitch it to them and let them decide and let them put in their information and their knowledge into that conversation and let them start off small and get to a bigger situation. And that way we're going to have sustainable outcomes. The critical thing, though, is once you've been on that bus and you're on that bus and the farmer's committed, please do not go up the drive 5 years down the line and go, actually, I know we wanted you to do that, but we've changed our mind, because I think that would just completely destroy the confidence.
Thanks, James. I think there might be a matchmaking role for you there. Kind of supplementary to that, Steve asks, the extreme side of farming for nature is rewilding. Are you picking up an appetite for that? Is it a positive impact, or is it just a fad?
I think what I would say is farming businesses have always diversified. They've always looked at the marketplace and looked at those opportunities. Farming enterprises across the Northeast have developed. About 30 to 40% of them have diversified enterprises. If there is a clear market opportunity for some farming businesses, this may be the way forward. So I think absolutely it's about presenting a suite of options about what they can do with their land, with advisors, with the information that's that people have got, and the fantastic different groups that are here on the call today, to sit down and go, right, what will work with them and strategically be sustainable in that long term.
Great, thanks. Any other views on rewilding? Is it just it's a gimmick, or is it a necessary part of recovery? Sharon, you got there a millisecond before Chris with your hand.
I was quick there. Yeah, it was just to say that I agree with James, obviously, and I was listening to Chris earlier on about the challenges that Natural England have as well. And I mean, I've been around, 10 years ago, we were sat here talking about climate change and mitigating climate emergency, and now we're 10 years on. And I think rewilding, we head up the rewilding network in the north, by the way, for Rewilding Britain, and what we'll really would love to have any projects put on the network. James, if you have any of your clients that want to put any projects on, it means very different things to very different people, though. But in terms of mobilising action, it's working, because, whether it's a fad or whether it's a buzzword or whether it's something, I don't think I've ever seen as much activity in terms of large-scale restoration. I've never seen it mentioned on Springwatch before, but they're talking about regenerative farming and, nature-friendly farming. It's becoming a word that's mobilising climate action, and for us, it's about the solutions. I don't want to be sat here in another 10 years still talking about a crisis, and we're done. We don't have time. So I think it's a good thing that rewilding is catching on. And, where Rewilding Britain's concerned, we have the 5 principles of one, which is community rewilding. If that works as an approach, then why not? if we can all work together collaboratively and have, farm and working alongside regenerative agriculture, everything, then as a climate solution, I'm all for that. That's me. Sorry, I'm a climate action person. That's all I want to do, save the planet before it's too late.
A worthy thing that you shouldn't have to apologise for, Sharon. Chris?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, it's not a fad. And I think what it has done is it's sort of questioned from a conservation perspective what we sort of been missing, actually, and how maybe, conservation science is a constantly evolving process. And one of the areas which I think we probably are learning from rewilding is how to improve ecological functionality within large landscape scale delivery. And I think that's something that has been missing. There is a need to bring back and put in grazing animals to many of our nature reserves. There is a need to improve the diversity of grazing animals, ponies and pigs and cattle, and that all improves that functionality. I think we need to challenge ourselves and question ourselves all the time about what more we can do within the conservation sector to improve nature within those places that we already are protecting. And I think rewilding has enabled us to question it, actually, and go, have we got it right? What more could we do? Do we need to change the management? And I think it's tested us, and I think that's a good thing.
That's great, Chris. Thanks very much. We haven't got any more questions in the question answer slot, so I guess we've got maybe 2 minutes. Does anyone want 30 seconds to say something that you've been afraid to say so far?
Can I just congratulate everybody that's been on this call today as well, for all the organisations that are doing what they're doing, because I think, it's important to remember that the people have been around a long time doing what we've been doing. And I think to get everybody together on a call like this, it's quite hopeful for us. It's inspires a lot of climate hope. But yeah, we just need to crack on. I mean, there was a question there about what would you say to your decision makers, if you could say something, get on with it. That's all I would say. Let's get on with it and let's not waste any more time.
We're trying. We're trying.
No, I don't mean you. I mean the decision makers that are higher than us. I mean the hierarchy that's much, much higher than us, because we're doing it. We know how to get on with it. I think it's the people.
I think to be fair though, they are trying. The intensity of the emergency is beginning to register, and for a chancellor to announce over £500 million for nature, for climate, and for that money to be going out the door now, the schemes are now live. That's all happened pretty quickly. So I think it's fair to say that big decisions are being made now, and things are starting to happen. I think the challenge is for us to make the most of that policy commitment, to make the most of the money that's now on the table.
And we are being pushed all the time to deliver more and more quickly. And I've never really had that before. There is this drive from senior politicians and within government that we need to not just deal with the planning, but do the delivery as well. And it's an incredibly exciting time. And, I'm sort of very torn that on the one hand, it can be very pessimistic because of the state of nature. But on the flip side of it, I've never been in a time where it's been more exciting, actually, and more optimistic that we are getting new laws, new money, new partnerships. If we can't do it now, we'll never do it. This is the time where we can really start to do something.
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about the public sector there and government, but actually the recognition within business that future investment must take account of climate and ecology, and that if it doesn't, it's not properly addressing the risks that business faces as well, which is again opening a new drive and new doors, I think, for us in a way that it hasn't before.
I would second that, Jeremy. The environmental disclosure requirements that are coming out for companies, I think it's going to be massive change. People will be able to look at that information and vote with their feet. So I think that's going to be a huge commercial aspect to it. I think James mentioned at the start about there needs to be a commercial footing, not just grants, and that's great. Okay.